But Robert, it just seemed like Jan completely missed a very important idea that could have allowed Anish to get a big advantage. And Anish had this chance here, and he had it on the next move. And Robert, no real doubt about the game that we wanted to show today. It is this final battle, the epic showdown between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Anish Giri, who somehow made it through to the finals.
Yeah, I mean, Anish Giri was lucky just to get through the first round, and Jan Nepomniachtchi was lucky to get here today at all, because
exactly.
In that final game, he needed to win. He did defeat Arjun Naroditsky, but he left no doubt today. He was speedy, he was playing well, and in this game, it started as a Sicilian, and it was actually a bit shocking to us that it wasn't a sharper Sicilian line.
It started off plenty sharp. We were expecting bishop g5, maybe bishop b3, one of typical. Nepo had played rook g1 yesterday, one of the sharpest moves in the position, but here taking the quieter approach, playing what is arguably the quietest move in the position, bishop e2, a very old school line championed by none other than Anatoly Karpov. So very Russian, but not very Nepo-like. And for a while, they followed the main line with this e5 system, which has become much more popular than the Scheveningen structure with e6.
That's right, because you allow your bishop to come to e6, you get a little more space for your pieces, but you give up the d5 square. And that's honestly what the game's centered around, right? The rook went to e1, the knight came to d7. White started pushing forward on the queen side, making sure that black wasn't going to play b5. But Daniel, we got to this point where the black queen goes to c7 on move 12, and then it feels like white was a bit frozen and started to misplay a bit.
It did. Black has a lot of ways to improve the position. Rook fe8. He can get his knight Ray Lopez style to g6. White, on the other hand, yeah, he's got control over d5, but you can't really get the b3 knight over to d5. And as you said, Jan starts stumbling. First, he plays h3, and now he plays a move that looks good. Bishop f1, yeah, he's sort of increasing his control over e4. But Robert, it just seemed like Jan completely missed a very important idea that could have allowed Anish to get a big advantage. And Anish had this chance here, and he had it on the next move.
That's right, because knight f8, it's not the right move, but he was able to find it the second time, because after rook e to c1, queen c6, you're threatening knight takes e4, free pawn. And we thought that after f3, he would surely play d5. That's automatic. The whole point in the nine. If you could play d5 successfully, you should be better from the black side. It opens up the entire state of the board for your pieces, and yet he decided to refrain from it. I'm not sure what he saw, Danya, in the line you're showing.
Absolutely not. White can play c4, but that doesn't really do anything. It just creates more weaknesses. Look at how nice black's position is. Every piece in an ideal square. The queen, the rook coming to d8. Black is better, no doubt about it. But Anish, instead of this, playing after f3, the move knight g6, Robert, not going d5 at all. We were shocked by this. Yeah, he improves the position of his knight, but why not d5? And Jan immediately going rook d1, saying, hey, Anish, thank you very much. Guess what? You're not getting another chance. I'm never letting you play d5 again. And the d5 square is what ultimately ends up killing him.
That's right. He recognized his mistake. That's what top players do. Even when that rook went to c1, he said, all right, I see black's plan. Let's stop that. So after the rook came to d1, black did a smart thing. The knight h7, trying to bring the bishop along the dark squares. But Jan responded well in kind. He brought his queen over to the f2 square. And after bishop h4, he played g3. He then played h4 and expanded. And all of a sudden, Danya, I think this was maybe one of the last chances that black had for active play, had he tried for a move like f5 after the move h4 was played.
Yeah, Anish had to get things going on the king side. Is his position great? No, it's not anymore. But the way that Anish played, he just played too slowly. Rook f8. Now Jan immediately getting the queen back to b2, hitting him where it hurts. And it's a double whammy because number one, the d6 pawn is incredibly weak. And as so often happens, look at that d5 square. Not only did Anish miss an opportunity to play d5, but now this is the game-winning square for white. This knight is an absolute monster. Anish eliminates it, but after queen takes d5, from a positional standpoint, the game is already over. Just look at how passive black is. Look at these light squares. And most importantly, Robert, these pawns on b7 and a6, they're frozen in place by the pawn on a5, and it's only a matter of time before white picks them off with his rooks and minor pieces.
That's right. And if black thinks that there's a free pawn hanging on c2, think again, because white plays rook d2, forcing the queen right back from where it came to c6. And after you swap queens on c6, white scoops up the a6 pawn, and guess what? There's an outside pass pawn with a rook behind it, and that's just going to be a devastating endgame where white's going to easily win.
Yeah, it is. And that's basically game. So what happened is Anish basically decides to trade queens. There's nothing else to do. He can't move the queen either because you lose b7. So you have to trade queens. After knight f6, the rook drops back to d2, and the game-winning moment, Robert, after bishop b8. It may seem like black is still a little bit stalled. You know, everything seems to be well defended, but boom goes the dynamite, and in comes the second rook.
And that was your idea. You were calling for that during the game. Rook A4. After the knight came back to E7 towards the queen side, the rook went to B4. And after a little bit of dancing here, rook takes D6 was possible the first time, but that wasn't played by Jan Nepomniachtchi. He didn't want to allow rook takes C2 any activity from Black's perspective. So instead, he decides to play bishop to B6, bishop back to F2. And while we were concerned he might repeat, no. He pushes his pawn to C4. And ultimately, Danya, his pawn push helped him win the game very quickly.
Yeah, first he goes C4, Anish going back with his knight, bishop F2, attacking B7, and Anish has to drop back even further to defend it, and bam, here goes C5, blasting open the position. Nothing Anish can do other than passively acquiesce, and here the game is simply over. These pawns are lost. Black does not have the defensive firepower, nor the horsepower, because the knights are nowhere near defending these pawns. Anish loses one pawn, and then shortly thereafter, boom, he loses the other one. And these double passers, of course, are going to decide the game. The rest of Anish's resistance was essentially symbolic, and Jan's time management was just divine this game. 2 minutes to 12 seconds at this point as well.
Yeah, and rook C4 was a classy finishing touch to this one, because already with the bishop threatened on A6, if the bishop retreats, the knight's a little bit loose on B7, the rook on B4 is a bit awkwardly placed. Rook C4 forces an exchange of rooks and allows white to then push those pawns on the queen side. So after rook C4, rook C6, bishop B5, another nice move, forcing the trade again on C4, and then the pawns were free to roam forward.
Boom, A6, anchoring the knight. Now you don't have to worry about the knight. All Nepo has to figure out is how to get the second pawn into motion, and that he does by chasing away Black's knight. Rook C8 and B4 anyway. If you take the pawn, you allow A7 followed by Rook D8 check. One of the pawns promotes. That's a great thing about having connected passers. You just need only one of them to promote. B5 and one final finishing touch. Knight A5, a little bit of a creative defense. Looks like you can't take because you dropped the exchange, but yes, you can take because the pawns are obviously completely unstoppable. First A7, the king cannot approach them because of the knight. And after B7, one of the pawns is going to promote inevitably, and Giri resigned the game, giving Jan Nepomniachtchi the victory in the RCC week 1. And this, ladies and gentlemen, was your Coinbase rapid recap for week 1.
And what a game that was, Danya. There are a lot of intricacies there. And for a blitz game, I think that was marvelously played by white. He did allow D5. Then he was able to kind of correct it, putting his rook back to D1. And from then on, it was his game, and there was no debate. So Jan Nepomniachtchi is the winner in week 1, and Anish Giri takes second place. And so we already have standings in this Rapid Chess Championship. It's Jan Nepomniachtchi in first, of course, Anish Giri in second. But look at this. We see how the Grand Prix points break down. So even as far down as 20th place, is I think they're only at 32nd, maybe. They gained one Grand Prix point. So it's important to take part and do well enough. And, you know, just because you have a slow start doesn't mean you can't catch up.
And I love it because you get rewarded for playing, right? You get rewarded for consistency. And, you know, all you need is one very successful performance, and that really catapults you to the top of the standings. But a huge start for Jan Nepomniachtchi. He is going to be a mainstay in the RCC. And speaking of being a mainstay, you might wonder when he plays next. Well, the schedule is very easy to keep track of, Robert. The Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase happens essentially every weekend, with the exception of major tournaments such as the Candidates Saturday and Sunday. Mark your calendars. Don't schedule anything for the morning.
That's absolutely true. Do not do that. You know, everyone who works a desk job, they usually leave space for the weekends for their friends. And I guess we're leaving that space for all of our friends online. Our best friend is the RCC. Our other friends, everybody
cancel your brunch, cancel your lunch, cancel your family breakfast. We are your friends, and you're watching the RCC. That's an order.
Yeah, you know, I don't really tell chat anything for the most part, but let alone that they're friends with me, because let's be honest, we're not friends. We don't know each other. But I am grateful that they tune in every single time for the show, for the great chess we've seen from some of the top players in the world. So, Danya, thanks for being alongside with me today. It's been a great time. And any final thoughts before we head on out and try to enjoy our Super Bowl Sunday?
Well, first of all, Robert, thank you to you. This is always such a pleasure. I'd like to thank everybody in the chat. We had such energy in both Twitch and YouTube. So thank you to everybody there. And thank you to Matt, our producer, for yet another excellent and flawless production. Robert, this weekend flew by in a flash. I've got Grand Prix early tomorrow morning. So much action in the month of February, but the Rapid Chess Championship is such an amazing addition to the tournament calendar. And I'm not just saying that. I think it was proven this weekend, which is just the first weekend of so many of these. You have so much to look forward to.
For sure. And on that note, with that great goodbye, we will say goodbye, and we'll see you next week for more from the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase.